What's up, guys? So, as you guys are probably aware, one of the things that is trending is the Democratic debate or something. Um, I'm pretty sure this is the stuff that happens before the major elections. So, it's pretty much debates to narrow it down to who's going to be the candidate who's nominated. So I couldn't help but notice that there are some tweets that bring up some interesting points, and something that has always stuck to me has been that question, or why it's even a question, of should the United States have an official language, particularly English, be declared as the national language. And for me, I do not know how to feel about that because I am someone who I cannot claim to be impartial because I can always see where people are coming from, and at some point I will want to pick a side, especially if one of the sides influences me or it affects me or benefits me. But at the same time, I like to focus on the grand scheme of things and how, if something is not a big deal, if something is not broken, why are you going to try to fix it? Why are you making an issue out of it? So just keep that in mind while you listen to my little opinion, my little discourses, or whatever you want to call anything I do up here. And also, I will be referencing some of the stuff that I read or what inspired this, and that way you guys can follow along if you wish to. And hi, Jordan, I see you. So there's this guy on the wonderful world of Twitter whose name is Charlie Kirk, and he said, retweet if you believe that English should be the official language of the United States. And honestly, for me, before I could answer that question yet again, because this is something that I remember doing an assignment on in school, and back then I said the United States should not have an official language. And most people voted in that fashion or thought pretty much in the same fashion that I did. I was scrolling through some of the replies of people, and it was interesting to see what people had to say. And one of the things that stood out to me was someone called Lance Carroll says, "What's the point of this? That people who speak a different language, primary language, can no longer speak at all or something? Are English speakers suddenly having trouble getting through life here in the US? Silliness." And I can see where he's coming from when it comes to that because honestly, for me, in my experience as a citizen of this country all my life, documentation is always available to you in English. That is like the standard, absolute given that you can always count that you're going to get documents and information in English. So I don't understand why some people try to be extra about having availability and accommodations for individuals whose first language is not English. So again, if it's not impacting you negatively, why do you have an issue? Why is it so difficult for you to have to press an extra number on your keypad when you're dialing a company just to clarify that you are someone who does not need a language accommodation? And maybe, just maybe, have you stopped to consider that there are people, a significant number of people who do need language accommodations? So I often feel like I don't want to sound like someone who has like a prejudice or something, but I feel like this only becomes an issue with a specific language or languages that seem to be less tolerated than others. Why does nobody bitch about French? Oh, because maybe French is not as common around here as, say, Spanish, or maybe Chinese, because we have a big number of people from who belong to those communities who speak those languages. So maybe we're just intimidated that we don't understand that. And for some reason, we are becoming less tolerant. Is that it? Like, is that the mentality of this nation? Because I would expect for this nation to be pretty accommodating, to be pretty welcoming. But when you have these issues that, in my opinion, are petty, this is where I become, let's say, confused, because I see what both sides are saying, but I cannot help but have an inclination for the side of, I don't see a problem. I don't see this affecting the way I go about my life. So why is this even an issue that's being discussed? And then someone replied to him saying, the point is, you wouldn't have ballots in 10 different languages, for instance, or documents being published in many languages. And then someone else replies with, who does it harm if there are ballots in 10 different languages? And then someone proceeds to turn this into a partisan issue, talking about Republicans. It harms Republicans. So I guess this is someone who has the perception of what the media presents a certain party to be as. So this is where I become a little bit skeptical. It's like, I don't think it's really a partisan issue. So, but at the same time, I see why people get that perception, because on both parties, there are people who have extreme views. So there are Democrats that I consider have good policies in mind, whereas I also think that there are Republicans that have great policies in mind. But at the same time, how do you determine which one is the one that should be victorious? Of course, you have elections. But what can I say? There is no such thing as a perfect stance on something. I'm not a believer that someone out there is absolutely righteous on everything. So the stuff that I consider would work for me may not work universally for everybody. It's not meant to. We are a big society. But at the same time, I feel like the vision of this nature is just a very sensitive thing to deal with, because there are so many things that we have tried to move on from that's fairly recent. And I feel like anytime you try to implement something, due to how diverse our population is, we got like old people, young people, foreigners, and all that. Those are factors that we were not taking into account way back in the day. I don't think we were really planning on having this much diversity having a say in our politics. So that's why finding a balance that satisfies everybody and makes peaceful like decisions for everybody is just so difficult to come by. Let me catch up with the comments before I keep going here. I was raised a polyglot. I will raise my kids to be polyglots. If no national language, then communication will be chaotic. And that makes sense. That is part of the reason why I believe that it is beneficial to agree on a language that we can pretty much count on to resort to as primary communication. However, as someone who has studied little bits and pieces of other languages, I can see why it is important for people to retain their maternal languages even when they migrate. Of course, I cannot pretend to comprehend it quite like other people can, but for me, exposing myself to other languages just helped me think differently. It helped me value certain things, appreciate certain things. And when I was in school, I always enjoyed being challenged to that extent. It's like, wow, there are sounds that I was not aware my body could emit, because the language that I grow up speaking, those sounds do not exist. And also, when it comes to the artistic aspect of it, I can see how a language shapes a certain culture. Um, so I wouldn't like to be associated with being a member of a nation that cannot tolerate that type of thing. Because I cannot help but feel that by you establishing a national language, you are, in a sense, being intolerant of those other languages. So I know that it's not just about that, but that's what makes it complicated for me because I cannot help but look at it as a rejection, a depreciation of what other people have to contribute, despite not being experts in our language. I just feel like it makes us seem less welcoming. But I know that's not entirely true because there are folks who just like everyone's favorite place to visit seems to be France or something. So I'm pretty sure that not everyone is an expert in French when they go to visit, but you are expected to know at least the very basics so that you can defend yourself when you're in foreign lands. But again, personally, I think it's because the number is significantly smaller, but I have never heard people trying to crap on certain languages. Like, I never hear anyone whining about Italian or French. Everyone thinks that French sounds exotic. Even I used to think that French sounds all extra. But when I think about it, I'm like, no, it's just a different way of communication. So we have our biases. We cannot deny it. So sometimes I feel like when this question of the national language comes up, I cannot help but feel like it's really more about targeting specific people. And usually, folks who may migrate here or immigrate here, they tend to have their skills already. I don't think that someone who is completely, like, absolutely 100% foreign to our culture just moves out here and has absolutely no resources to defend themselves with. They usually come with family who has been here for a while, who can communicate in the language here so they can accommodate that person who's coming in. Or you have money, you can afford to have services for like translation and all those other things. So maybe that doesn't escalate to that issue because these people from these other countries may be more prone to having resources, but not everyone has those types of resources. Again, this is just me trying to think critically. I am not saying this is actually what is happening, but based on what I observe every time this conversation comes up, that's what I notice the most. So that's why I bring this up, express it, and then of course pass the question off to you. What do you guys think? What do you have to say? What have you experienced? What have you heard? I want to hear it all and make this the topic where we discuss that because I have learned that there's always more than meets the eye when it comes to certain issues. When I was in Japan, there were no accommodations. I had to learn their language and culture. What about the Creole, French? Yeah, tell me about it. That's what I was discussing. I'm with you. We shouldn't have an official language. And honestly, with what America is supposed to represent on a global level, I feel like it is all those languages and groups of people and all that good stuff coming together that has made this country what it is. So I want to say this one seems to be the most inclusive country, but again, I can see why some people may oppose it. But honestly, what can I say? I feel like this is the easiest place for foreigners to just come together along with other people. And what I mean by that is, let's face it, at some point, everyone wanted to come here. Some people still want to come here. There are some other countries that seem to be becoming more popular now. Like, I seem to be hearing a lot of stuff about the UK, and even at some point, I was researching and looking into it, and I'm like, what makes the UK so great? and just to expand my horizons as well, because I just really do not know much about anything outside the US. But when I think about it, there's like a pattern that I'm just miserably failing to put it together right now, but I will continue to explore it, so maybe in a future stream I'll be better prepared. But for right now, I just want to focus on the discussion of establishing a national language. And now that I'm older, it's like I want to be righteous and be like, yeah, totally, we should not have an official language because, that'll, what can I say, affect so many people already. And why it's so easy to find help. Like, it's so easy to find people who can interpret things and translate things and write things, transcripts, whatever you call it. So, if we have that resource, which is a lot of people who are capable of assisting us with helping those who cannot communicate in English, then why do we want to do away with that when there is absolutely no problem? And it gets better the further you read into this, and I'll get to it. So, someone said, no, the economy, millions of dollars spent to adequate to every language possible. To which I personally thought, I think that is great. It is actually job opportunities for people with language skills, unless you have something against that type of creation. It's about time the foreign language courses we are put through in school worked for something beyond short, informal communications. Let's face it, once you leave school, usually you took very basic levels of a foreign language because maybe your course of study demanded that. But after that, how often do you actually use it? Most of us don't get to travel. So I understand why you probably do not feel like you need to care about retaining another language, but maybe that could serve as encouragement for you to retain your language skills. How about if we as a nation become more competitive? I feel like there are people in other countries who can handle two, three, four languages. So why do we have to just make a scene and protest and stick only to one language? A language that has its limitations. Let's face it, English is not very clear on some stuff, whereas other languages do not have those problems. Like, I will never forget when I was taking French, one of the things my teacher was emphasizing that to me it was insane to try to wrap my head around was idiomatic expressions. How something in one language you cannot just literally translate into English because the meaning of it gets lost, the humor gets lost. So, again, like I was saying earlier, those are little things that if it weren't for my exposure to another language, I would have no idea that that is a thing. So I appreciate the fact that I was given an opportunity to be exposed to foreign languages to where I could grasp those things. So to most people, you may not really see the value behind it, but as someone who is curious and I like to understand how things just work, exposing myself to that really challenged me and it forced me to think beyond what I hear and what I see. So maybe that's why you guys might notice in me that I have a very curious nature. And sometimes I cannot, sometimes I feel embarrassed when I like watch one of my own playbacks and I'm like, wow, I sound really, really ignorant and really, really dumb there. But at the same time, I'm glad that that happens to me because I can acknowledge that I am not as amazing as I think I am, and I can just pick up from there and be like, oh, here's an opportunity for me to grow. So it's not limited to just skills on math and all those mundane, boring things that we're used to. There's a lot of opportunity when it comes to languages. because other languages house cultural values, and those cultural values can help us grow in our own nation. But if we shut ourselves from that, from exposing ourselves to that and tolerating that stuff in our own lands, how can we expect to move forward? And that there are a lot of foreigners who have contributed to this land. So why would we be like, you know what? It's unacceptable for you to bring your language to this land. It again. I know it's not just limited to just that, but that's the side of me that says this is like we're trying to say that we are intolerant of those things. And again, I know it's not limited to just that, but that's how that's the impression it just gives me. Um, but then again, we also live in sensitive times where people seem to be turning everything into attacks. Like, oh, this is an attack on other cultures, an attack on other nations, an attack on races, and all that. And I'm like, I can see why you feel that way, but I'm sure that there's more to it than that. And that's what I want to get to the bottom of it, pretty much. So this is my starting point. And then some people, like, who said this? Holger, when you said that there were no accommodations in Japan, I get it. Most other countries, it's like they don't even consider this stuff. So why does the US have to be the one that doesn't have a border, that doesn't have a national language, and this and that? Well, on the note of national language, I think you cannot have it because the reality is that there is a lot of like mixing going on. Like it's not limited to put it simply, it's not just black, white, English, and maybe let's say just Spanish, since we hear about that a lot in the news. It's not that simple. There's more that composes this country that we're just not paying attention to, or we refuse to pay attention to it. And I know that the goal is to get people to assimilate when you move to another country. And in the past, I have said that if you're moving to another country, you are the one who is responsible for assimilating and understanding the laws of that new country. However, when it comes to language, communication, would you really pick on an older person who is really trying to grasp a new language, but when you hit a certain age, it's just difficult? So I wouldn't want to make it really impossible for someone from another country to just come over, especially if they mean well. So hopefully I make my point across, but I don't see why you have to make it unnecessarily difficult. I understand that resources can be limited, so you have to determine we can only allow certain people in the country realistically because we only have so much of this and that. But when you think about this critically and you investigate further, there is so much time, so much money, so many resources, so much food, which is a resource, all that good stuff that goes wasted in this country. So you will never convince me that it's about us running out of resources. Yes, there does need to be a balance, but the way that you're presenting how the balance must be established is where I'm not convinced that. So, of course, it would help if I personally did further research as to what makes people say that. But just scratching the surface, what I hear is just petty excuses. Uh, let's see. USA should be the land of the free, but they cannot ever prove that. I am not angry, just that nobody cannot change race of different languages, the nature from God. A polyglot means someone who speaks multiple. Yeah. What would they contribute? What was that question? Sorry, it was a while ago, so I missed it. Do you mean what would be contributed from foreigners who bring about their own languages to the homeland? An example that I was trying to say is that for me personally, when I expose myself to a different language and a different culture, it just helps me think better and think differently. It's like music. When I practice music, I can just feel my brain matter becoming like expanded or something. It's just a side of me that gets activated. My creativity is better, my mood is better, my communication skills improve even because I'm like, I'm actually better at listening and multitasking and paying attention to detail with sounds emitted by an instrument, that it can also help me focus on human speech, which is a sound. I used to have terrible listening skills until I was trained on how to focus on sounds emitted from a source. So I'm like, okay, practicing how to have relative pitch helped me become better at listening to actual people, because you have to have an incredible amount of focus to be able to accomplish that. So if I take that experience and transfer it to language skills, it's about the same effect for me. I don't expect you to feel the same effect as me because we're two different individuals. But I'm pretty sure that there's people out there who would understand where I'm coming from, because that effect is not exclusive to me. So hopefully that clarifies a little something, something. I always want to see Jewish men to be president in the United States and more different race to be president of, sorry, to be presidents of different languages to help people learn more different cultures in the United States and see if the United States is really that much a land that really has so much integration and whatnot. I think it would make sense for us to be more aware about what other cultures are talking about. I feel like we're trying to become so centralized and sheltered on like establishing a culture for the United States, when the whole point of the United States is that many factors, many places, many people, many languages had to come together to make this possible. Of course, the original settlement, let's call it original settlement, European invasion is what I mean to say. Of course, English was the primary language because the English were the people who were better equipped with better technology, and they were forcing their way into the land, and they came out victorious from all the conflicts back in the day. So, of course, English was the winner. And that's why it became, with an imperialistic mindset, that's how it became so popular. It was established here, it was established in many other nations throughout the globe until it just somehow stopped. It doesn't mean that the influence stopped, it means that the spread of it did not get bad enough to where all other languages were wiped out. But it is said that there have been many civilizations and many cultures that, and many languages in turn, or in that same boat, that have gotten lost as a result of all these conflicts and stuff. So so that's what I'm saying. It's like, if back then that was not seen as an evil thing, invasions where you're actually trying to wipe out races and stuff, that's actually a bad thing. So why would we in modern times be promoting that in a different way by saying, oh yeah, we need to have a national language? See what I mean? So it's like it was considered an evil thing that we were being invaded and we were losing so much culture, so much history, so many languages. Some people's cultures were disrupted and some of them were completely eradicated, destroyed, taken over. We look at that as an evil thing. So why would we not look at us pretty much closing other people's chances of bringing their language and cultures and influences over? Why is that not judged as a terrible thing in modern days? Just because we're not actively shooting at the people who are coming over, just to put it bluntly, doesn't mean that it's not an evil thing. So again, that's where I flip the coin. I turn my switch on and I try to think critically, and I'm like, well, there is the positive side, which is, well, confusion would be would decrease, because let's face it, when you try to communicate things to someone whose first language is not English, there can be a lot of miscommunication, there can be a lot of misunderstanding, and I understand that that can get frustrating at some point. But at the same time, I find it beautiful that at some point we're able to make it work. It's like, oh, I didn't have to beat you up to get to understand what I'm saying so that we can make a project work or something. You just needed a little bit of patience. You just needed to get extra creative to figure out a way that you can communicate with this person so that they can get it. That's all it takes. Just a little bit of patience, a little bit of effort on your part. But I find that most people nowadays, they just want things to work, and you don't want to deal with any inconvenience whatsoever. So the people who get upset or make comments about having to press one for English when they call some number. It's like, you're being over dramatic. You're just being a drama queen. That is a very minimal obstruction to your day. Like, why are you making it such a big deal? So I think that people really need to work more on their individual attitudes, more than the political stuff going on. Like, oh, other people bringing their language is a bad thing. No, I don't think it's a bad thing. I think that you're intimidated by stuff that's foreign to you. If you're intimidated by stuff that's unknown to you, that is your personal problem. That's not someone else's problem, everybody else's problem. That's not the problem of other people coming over here. If you're that paranoid, that is your problem. That is your issue. Because I have never walked by people who are speaking, say, Chinese or something that I have no clue about what is being said. I'm never wondering. I'm never caring. I'm never mindful about what they're saying. They could be talking about me. They could be insulting me. They could be saying whatever. But as long as they're not touching me or vandalizing my property, I just don't care about what they say. Oh, but they can find refuge in the fact that you don't understand. That's pretty cowardly. Again, Zam does not care. There's other stuff out there that I need to worry about. What some people on the street that I never have anything to do with say is nothing for me. So, of course, again, I know that there's more to it than that. I always like to present the more overly simplistic aspect of it for the sake of clarity. But you guys feel free to expand on anything that I say and challenge my views further. But really, I like to present it as that simple because that's really how I see it. It is that simple for me. Um, so a lot of the things that people whine and complain about is just so petty for me that I just refuse to think that way. It's like I was explaining to a colleague yesterday that my tolerance for discomfort and pain is unbelievable. Like, of course, I don't want to say that I expose myself to danger constantly or to pain constantly to like become stronger or anything like that. No, it's just that that's just how I am. When I'm in severe pain, I'm not one of those people who's always like crying about it. I may let you know just in case something happens to me. It doesn't catch you off guard. But I am not that person who's like, oh my God, I have cramps and oh, this and that. My life is over. Like, I'm not dwelling on the stuff that's bothering me or making me uncomfortable. I express it to the corresponding people for my safety so that they know what to do in case something happens. But it's not like I'm dwelling on that, especially to feel special and seek attention. Or or say when the weather is really hot or when it's really cold. I never complain about the weather. Why? Because I accommodate for it. I prepare myself for it. If it's going to be cold, layer up. If it's going to be hot, stay hydrated and wear clothes that are breathable material, pretty much. So there's people who I'm surrounded by, who it's like you go into a room and all they say is, it's so hot in here, it's so musty in here. Or, you're walking into a freezer and they're like, oh my God, it's so cold in here. Da, da, da. No shit. That's what a freezer does. It freezes thing. So if you know that you are going to be exposed to that freezing environment for extended periods of time, maybe consider wearing long sleeves. So, see what I mean? I just cannot tolerate people who complain over stuff that has easy solutions. I can feel no sympathy whatsoever for you. And if you need that tactic to get attention, you need to reevaluate your life. But of course, when I say stuff like that, I'm blaming the victim and I am perpetuating whatever it is that people accuse me of. But I'm not going to change because I do believe that with this attitude, I will live a better life. I do live a better life. I'm not miserable dwelling on petty things. And I am actually someone you are able to sustain a conversation with that goes beyond what your personal issues are. See what I mean? So that's where I like to just take a minute and just be full of myself and brag because it's just amazing to me that that's what people, if people rechannel their energy to other stuff, they could be living such better lives. And that's what I'm not seeing. Yeah. It's like I catch myself doing that too. It's like, okay, Zam, I know you had a terrible day. I know that you're in pain, but you need to rechannel all that negative energy and commit to the stuff that is important to you. What's important to me is, of course, exercising, my diet, streaming, art, selling my stuff. So, in my mental agenda of who and what I am, there is no room for complaining about petty things. There just isn't. So, of course, I'm not perfect. I'm still a human. I will occasionally have my drama queen moments, but that's what social media is for. That's what friends are for. That's what family is for. I can just bitch and vent and then get over myself and keep going about my life. But that's not how I am on a constant basis. That's the difference. There's no way that I could be this sane if I dwelt on that stuff. So, but anyways, you guys, let's see if I find more comments on the English stuff. Not sure why the candidates are speaking in Spanish. The debate is in English. Millions of Americans don't speak or understand Spanish. See, this person is talking about this one guy called Robert. He's from Texas. I read about him earlier. I forget his last name, but basically there was this guy in a debate in which he started speaking Spanish and it was so awkward because you can tell that he's not a like native Spanish speaker, and as a result you can tell that he's trying to force himself to cater to minorities, to cater to like the Hispanic vote or something. And I'm like, no, just be normal. If the discourse is programmed to be in English, stick to English. They are already working on the, what is that called? Closed caption? To where any individual who has issues understanding English, they can access that thing on their TV and voila. But to have a politician just all of a sudden like flick a switch and go like, I am going to continue my discourse on this different language that, I really do not belong in speaking. Like I am fluent, but, vocalizing is just different for me, or verbalizing it. So it's just awkward, and you can just tell that this person is trying too hard to become popular amongst a group of people that it comes out as disingenuous. Disingenuous. That is one word that I cannot say when I'm talking fast. But anyways, so with this guy, what this guy is saying, it's like, I don't like that he specifically said millions of Americans don't speak or understand Spanish. Well, guess what? There are a few million that do speak and understand Spanish. So I don't think that's the problem. So I can see what he says on the first round, which is not sure why they're speaking in Spanish. It's like, yeah, there's no necessity for you to be speaking in Spanish. Uh, right, you maybe you want to be applauded for your language skills. Congratulations. But at the same time, when someone attacks just the Spanish language, that's when I become a little skeptical. I'm like, oh, you just have an issue with Spanish. But which Spanish speakers do you have issues with? I don't usually hear people attacking Spaniards. So is it really a Latin American issue? Like Latin America meaning what we commonly label it as, like Mexico and South America, perhaps. So, there's like this. I don't know how to prove this entirely, but there seems to be a pattern. If it's European and or European origin, it's glorified, and that's crazy because Spanish, when you think about it, that is actually a white man language because it does come from like Europe, Spain, right? So that is a white man language, but yet you're still attacking it. But you're only attacking it because that white man language is being spoken by people who are not completely white. So, see, that's the other side of the coin where I like to think critically and be like, what is the issue again? Because you seem to be attacking yourself. You just don't catch it, you just don't realize it. So, hopefully, you guys see what I am trying to express there. It's just that this is a nation that was founded on European values. So, therefore, European stuff is going to be more celebrated and more glorified, more acceptable, more attractive, more fascinating. Like, Paris, for some reason, has to be the fashion capital of the world. And I'm like, no. To me, there's more fashion that is captivating. But of course, what I have to say doesn't matter because I'm the minority who doesn't find the Francis stuff impressive. That's fine. Yeah, and there's actually French blood running through my very veins, but that doesn't mean that I have to be all wowed about French stuff, especially if how many generations ago was my French heritage? Four? Three? I'm disconnected. I'm detached from that. So I cannot even, like, find myself gravitated towards that? So, anyways, you guys, I'm going off a tangent there. Um, let's see. And of course, we have the occasional. I want to say these are trolls, but maybe they're serious. But I look at it as a troll, and that is someone said, I think that official language should be Navajo. But when you think about it, well, yeah, the natives were here first, so why not? If you're really that concerned about reparations, why not? But then again, that would impact our entire education system. There is no way that I could succeed in a society where that's the language. Because, English is what it is for me mentally. So, so yeah, you guys, it's crazy. This is why I find this topic so fascinating. There is more to it than meets the eye, and that's why I wanted to bring it here and discuss it with you guys and see what you guys have to say. Let's see, where am I at? Um, okay, okay, I catch myself. The English vocabulary has more words than any other language, 600,000 or more words. Most languages have 50 to 60,000 words at most. Well, isn't English a language that had to borrow from so many languages to become the language that it is? So, English on its own, it's not like, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not purely English. It's like it had to borrow from other languages and then maybe add an English twist to it to become English. So yeah, I guess so. I guess English was good about, stealing words from other languages and like bending them to suit the English sounds. But in the grand scheme of things, there are so many French words that have been implemented and accepted as English words, just pronounced maybe differently. But yeah, English had to borrow from so many languages to become English. From what I understand, like it's been a minute since I explored like languages like that, but that's the one thing that stood out to me that one of my English teachers pointed out. He was like, "Oh yeah, if you ever notice English words that are actually from another language is because we had to borrow from other languages to develop our own language." I studied Old English and Middle English and all that stuff, and I was just so confused. Like, that part of my brain is just dead. So I cannot really cite some examples from like the evolution of the English language from its origins to what it's become today, modern English. But I just know that a lot of words had to be taken from other languages. I just remember that much. Bottom line for me is that there needs to be a common language that everyone has to learn, but we should also actively learn and speak other languages. Thank you, Jimmy. Because earlier I said, how about if we become more competitive individually to where we actually educate ourselves to just be more skilled. Languages are skills. So maybe take on the challenge of just learning shit outside of your comfort zone. Clearly, English is everyone's comfort zone around here. What is wrong with you exercising your brain to become better at other things? See what I mean? So, but anyways, that's the side of me where I'm someone who, if I see the solution to the problem, that's all I can ever see and focus on, the solution. You as a human are capable of learning unless you have a learning challenge, a learning disability of some sort. But there's stuff that you can do to improve yourself, but you're trying to say that other people are the problem. You're trying to blame others for your individual inefficiency or your individual challenges or what you lack. No, it is possible for you to become better, to learn languages. So while that remains a fact, I expect that people take that responsibility onto their hands and challenge themselves to become better and more skilled. So yeah, Jimmy, I'm so glad that you said that because that's I promise you that I said that earlier in the stream. Um, yeah, okay. Hello Zamri. Hi JP. Zamri, how about people born in Japan? Let's say black man was born in Japan, raising. Hey, there's a word for that. There's like a Japanese word for when you're mixed, like half Japanese and half black, but I can't remember. Sorry. All right. Was born in Japan, raised in Japan. He gotta talk nothing but Japanese because his parents just talk Japanese. If a Mexican guy from the UK, born in the UK, who's gonna talk British of different language, and black people in America don't even talk African because we were born in USA, came from the boat. Exactly. So, but if you think about it, why did black people lose their maternal languages? Because they got English beat into them. Like, this was not a place that began out of the kindness of people's heart. There had to be violence, there had to be wars fought, battles, rape, even. So, it's not like this society. We live in more peaceful times. We don't live in the times when this shit was getting started. Because it was terrible out here. We gotta say the thing the way it is. So so when I think about that, it's like, what am I supposed to sound like? But when I think about my personal heritage, it's like I'm so mixed that it's like, am I supposed to sound Italian? Am I supposed to sound French? Am I supposed to sound English? Am I supposed to sound native? Am I supposed to sound like, I don't want to just say African because that's so like broad, but whatever my descendants is from there, it's, I'm not sure how much is in there, but in the family, it there's evidence that there are black folks in there, but this was a few generations ago, and I have asked my mother, but she doesn't know. Nobody knows where they came from. I don't think they even knew where they came from. So why do you think that is? That is no accident. The fact that minorities cannot trace their roots is not an accident. All right. So maybe that's where we need to take the conversation in that direction. Why is English the the language that's governing the place? Just be sincere about it. Just be like, hey, back in the day, violence, lots of violence. We had imperialistic views. If we heard anything that was not English, it was completely unacceptable, and we punished people for it. So at least eventually we were allowed to learn how to read, like minorities were deliberately illiterate, to keep you from being educated and voting and all that stuff. But, that's pretty messed up. That had to change at some point. But see what I mean? Just tell stuff how it is. Tell us the truth. Like, we messed up at some point. So yeah, but anyways, um let's see. Wouldn't someone not speaking our language mean that they are afraid of our language and culture? In that situation, I like to consider how accessible was our language to this person, because not everyone has the ability to go to school when you're young and have a bilingual program. Like, I had the fortune that every single school that I went to when I was a kid and I moved into, they were offering foreign courses of some sort, either French or Spanish or Latin. And Latin is supposed to be a dead language, spoken wise. But other places, though, where these other people are coming from, wherever it is that they're coming from, how accessible is English for them in their courses of study, as we call it here? It is possible that French people, just to name a random example, may not consider introducing their kids to English until maybe high school. Some people learn stuff better in high school. Other people just need to be exposed to stuff from the moment they're like 5 years old. So that's what I would ask. Like, how accessible did this person have English to them? Because it is possible that they're not afraid of the language itself, is they were sheltered from it by their own culture, by their own government, by their own education system. I cannot prove that, for I have never looked into it. Like, you asking that question is the first time that I've thought about that or considered that. I never think that people are fearful of a language or culture. The only way might be if you're influenced by the media and you hear a lot of negative things. Um, but outside of that, you individually, it depends on your circumstances. And some people do not have access to other languages simply because they cannot afford it. Like for me, had I gone to college, I don't think that unless it was a necessity, I would not have continued French or Spanish. I have always been interested in Portuguese as well, but I highly doubt that I would have begun to learn that. Like, especially way after my teens. See what I mean? So that's what I would explore. I think that some people just had limited access to English as it is. As popular as English is, it doesn't mean that everyone gets to it. So, something to consider. Speaking Spanish is pandering. I oppose it because it is used for communicating with illegal aliens, has nothing to do with race. There were almost 1,000 languages spoken by Native Americans. Did it unite or benefit them? See, I know that amongst Native Americans, they had their own wars. It's not like the natives were just clumped together as a group of people and they all got along. They all had their training. They all had like their own like societies going on. Like, not at all. They were all separate. But the land is so huge, it allows for that. It's like you cannot expect for, let's say, the let's pick Ohio for example. You had like, didn't they have like natives called the Miami, and who else was out there? um One that starts with an S. Like all those different tribes or something. It's a huge place, it's a huge land, so everyone will have their own stuff going on. You cannot expect for everyone to just live merrily ever after when your land that affects you, your resources affect you, your ancestors, generations, habits, weather affects you. Like, there's so many things that shape a society. And this is a huge land. Just like in modern days, the society, the United States, what happens on the West Coast, there are some differences to what happens in the East Coast, as well as North and South. So you cannot expect for this to be like a contained type of thing. So, of course, the natives were no different. They had their own stuff going on, like their own differences to settle and whatnot. So, so it's all because of this huge landmass. It allows for so much to exist. Zimri, the only time I can learn a different language is when I put different language in movies on DVD, so I know what they're saying. Then I know all the scripts in the movies. You know what? I used to do that too. Like, to practice how to enunciate in another language, I would play, I'll never forget, X-Men 2 United in DVD. That was the first movie that I was able to have French audio on. Was it French audio or French subtitles? It had French in it, and I was just so blown away. I was like, oh my god, I am going to learn French. I got this, but then it never happened. I never stuck to it. Let's see. My native side speaks Cree. Most other languages borrow from English. Most scientific, technological, medical terminology in foreign languages comes from English. Well, I guess that's because wasn't English determined to be like that international term for that, for the sake of communication clarity? Just as SI, the SI system thing in science is from French, it's not from English. So, yeah, at some point people said, you know what, English has become so like common. Let's just go ahead and assign it to, say, medical terminology. So, so other languages have contributed to English more than we like to give it credit to. Open-minded is way better than closed-minded. Well, I try to be. I can't always say that I ace it, but I try to be. The word for mixed in Japanese and black is ainoku. Also, hapa, which means half. That's the one I was looking for. Everyone needs to just be themselves, but it's important where that person came from. Sorry. Let's see. Chunhead? Up some families. Not sure what that means. I guess it means another language. It's fun to read different languages on books and papers, really. Make everybody's brain grow bigger of exercise. Yeah, definitely. I can honestly say that when I try a new language, it's like my brain matter is just I'm not so good at it, but anyway. Yes, subtitles is fun. Especially when you see those little accent marks, like French has the accent grave, accent aigu, and all that stuff, and I just, no. I don't remember any of them now. Well, guys, I'm going to wrap it up here because I'm having my symptoms of my normal, regular allergies. So it's been fun. I enjoyed this topic a lot. And of course, there's more to it than this, but at least we got it started. So then I'll just try to catch up to it and bring it up again at another time, especially when I feel better and have my mind together and I'm not so sick and have more energy and it's not so late. Yada, yada, yada. Sign language is sweet too. Oh, yeah. I've never learned sign language like at all. It's never been offered anywhere I go to, so. But, anyways. Take care, Zamri. I love this video. It's very different. Yay! Awesome. Alright, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I'll see you soon.